Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 17. I feel I have to tell you that I had to record this one twice. As I've said in the last outro, I would like to split each video into two sections. In one half I do proper infrastructure work, and in the second half, I just mess around with some decorating. Well, I tried to do it for this one, but ended up having to leave the decorating part half done in the end, and it didn't sit well with me. After sleeping on it, I decided to just redo the whole recording. As it turns out, it takes a whole episode to do the fields for 3 farming industries, but I think the end results will be worth the effort. But you'll be the judge of that. By the way, the infrastructure work I've been for the time being was just some bridges going over the town stations. I wasn't really happy with most of them anyway, so I don't feel too bad about deleting that footage. Before we get started, if this is not your first video from this channel, you already know what to expect. If you want to be kept up to date, please consider subscribing, and if you like what you see, leaving a like will also help letting me know what to focus on. But enough talking, let's get into it. Now, here's the thing. I kind of doubt that I will have a lot to talk about in this one. Whenever I have a lot of dead air in the commentary track, I will just try to increase the music volume, so it's not completely unwatchable. But prepare to have long stretches where I say nothing. Anyways, before we get started on the actual decorating, let's do a tiny bit of proper work. Not much, but I think we should do some signaling around the recently double-tracked line. We didn't have the time to do it in the last episode. I could have waited for the train to go back to the unsignaled parts of the line, but that would have taken a bit too long, so I just left it. But, we did get a bit of a conflict on that very line. As it turns out, the part where the tools factory line splits off is a bit too short, so the trains ended up hanging back into the junction. Should be a quick fix. And that should do it. The trains now have enough room to not block each other. Well, time to get started on these farms. We have a nice little mountain range above them, so we can use that as a natural barrier for the fields. But of course, we don't need the vanilla fields anymore, so those will have to go. I'm just glad the game doesn't tie actual production amounts to these fields. They are purely decorative, so deleting them will not have any impact on the main production buildings. Next, let's get rid of the unnecessary props littering the place. We have trees and rocks that need to go. I made sure not to delete the trees that are sitting on top of that mountain range, those can stay. I also went over the whole area with a smoothing tool. Farm fields don't tend to be too bumpy. Next, let's place some dirt roads which will serve as a hard barrier to our fields. It will run more or less along that forest we carefully skirted around. There are a few places where the turns are a bit too narrow. In those instances, I think we can sacrifice a bit of the forest. I accidentally clipped into the forest on this mountain, so I just deleted the whole thing, and will replant it in the future. And here comes the first big pause in the commentary. We are just going to go around, and sketch out a rough idea where we want our fields to be. Enjoy the music in the meantime. Well, that about does it for the roads. Now come the fences. I will not place them around every field, that would be madness. What I will do instead, is select a couple cells in the pattern, and use them as pastures for farm animals. I did get a small pack on the workshop which allows us to place them, so that's what we will do. But we don't want them to escape, so let's place the fences. I specifically made sure to select the cells that are closest to the train tracks, and are next to the farm buildings. I guess the farmers like to keep an eye on their herds. Plus, it looks nice when the trains drive by. I didn't do every cell, I wanted to leave a couple of them to be filled with trees. I also decided not to bother with curved fences. It's a bit of a headache to try to line them up perfectly, so I just went with straight stretches, with frequent turns. We also don't have to fill up each cell completely. We can leave one half for trees, or maybe have a small forest in the middle of a long piece. Now the animals themselves. The pack I got only really have 3 we can use. Cows, horses, and sheep. Well, technically 4, since cows and bulls are separate props. The first pasture will be for cows, with a couple bulls peppered in for good measure. I'm just glad these assets are animated, and aren't just static objects. A bit of a shame they don't move around, but let's not be too greedy. The next pen is for horses. I placed much fewer of them. Whenever I've seen horses out on pastures, I notice that they are always less numerous than cows. I bet they like to have more space to themselves. Next are the sheep. I did place quite a few of these, and I tried to group them together much more than the other animals. I ended up creating 2 big flocks, with some sporadic grazers in between that wandered away from the others. The last 2 pastures are just cows and horses again. Next, it's time to place down the bushes around the train tracks. It's the same idea we had around the previous farms. We have bushes right next to the tracks, and then we can place the actual trees beyond them. After this, we do the same thing again, select the prop eraser, set it to the smallest size, and cut down the bushes that are a bit too close to the tracks. The problem is, the fences are way too close to the tracks, so we ended up deleting sections of that too. I only noticed the full extent of the damage after the recording was over, but we can easily redraw the places affected. I also wanted to cut back the bushes that hang too far into the pastures. It did get rid of some of the animals, unfortunately. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that we will need to redo the sections of the pastures that are right next to the tracks. For the fences where I noticed the gaps, I just used some extra bushes to hide the imperfections. Another big gap in the fences. Let's just hide it, and get back to work. Next, let's place the tree barriers between the fields. We can just use the roads as the guidelines. This time, I didn't want to go overboard with it, so I made sure the brush was barely wider than the roads, and lowered the strength of it quite a bit. We just want a bit of foliage to break up the monotony. Alright. Time to fill in some gaps. We did leave some of the cells next to the tracks empty, so we can just use those as leftover forests. I also decided to fill in some of the cells in the middle of the pattern. I know that it's not really realistic to sacrifice land in the middle of already cultivated areas. Normally, we would have strips of forests between groups of fields, but this will also do, I think. But, I do think it kind of makes sense to fill in the cells that are a bit irregular in shape, like this triangle. Farm fields tend to be a bit more rectangular. And here comes the most boring part. The painting of the actual crops. I did end up finding where the downloaded textures were, they were just dumped into the general category. I also got a second set of textures, so we have a lot more to work with. The only downside of these is that they look a bit ugly from far away, and they lack the bump maps the vanilla fields have, so they look quite flat from up close. But they look really nice from a medium distance, like from ground level, which is all we care about. I just selected one of the textures, and filled in some of the randomly selected cells. And then moved on with another texture. And I kept doing that until all the fields were finished. Phew, that was quite a bit of painting work. But, the end result is quite nice. At least personally, I like it quite a bit. What I wanted to do next was a bit of extra foliage between areas. I still want to place more fields on the other side of the tracks, but I think we can fill in the rest of the place with a nice dense forest. But, I did feel it would make sense to have at least a token road going between the farms and the rest of the road network, so I just placed a quick connection going over our railroad. I have a feeling these will be replaced by those rural brick bridges in the near future. They are just placeholders for now. Well, all this big empty space is ripe for a bit of reforestation. I seriously considered doing a bit of research to make sure we use the correct kinds of trees and bushes, maybe even get a UK-specific tree pack from the workshop. I might do that one day, but I didn't want to interrupt the recording at this point. For now, I just painted over the tracks without spacing in mind. We can just use the eraser to cut down the stuff that are a bit too close for comfort. It might be helpful to have the brush strength on 100% for this one though. Let's just fill in these last remaining gaps, and we can pretty much call it a day. So yeah, I think that will do it for today. Sure, we didn't do much concrete work, apart from a couple small fixes at the start, but these farm fields did come out pretty nice in the end. We will need to do small changes to it, mostly around the fences near the tracks, but other than that, it's not half bad. Maybe we could place a couple hedgerows between a couple fields. They are pretty common in the English countryside. Not every field though, just some of them. We also need to do the other side of the tracks, but I kind of doubt we will do this many fields there. After this, we could maybe do some decorating around the foresting industries. I would love to build proper end stations around some of them, for which we can get some inspiration from the Derail Valley stations. Not going to do carbon copies, just get some ideas from them. At least filling in the countryside will be a lot easier with those places. We just go nuts with the tree brush. Anyways, if you haven't done it already, I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel, and leaving a like would also let me know that this video was worth making. If you feel that it was good enough, and you can afford it, please consider going to my Ko-fi page, which you can find in the description, and donate an amount that you feel is appropriate. And if you did like what you've seen, there should be links to some of my other videos and playlists on the screen. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.